Hi, this is Dee with Divine L. And Revelations. It seems that it's time for a history lesson. History, her story. Um, I know I put out a video yesterday trying to give a warning and a heads up because people don't understand what they play with. Um, and it's a mistake, but it's not one that can't be corrected. And I do want to apologize to Sir Sam the Illusionist, um, for saying that you are screwed, basically. Because you're not. Not 100%, no. There's, well, it's like the song from Led Zeppelin. There are two paths you can go down. But in the long run, there's always time to change the road you're on. I believe, looking at your videos, that you have looked briefly at the Book of Ra. The two paths of service to self, service to others. But I infer that and counter that it's time for us to pick a new path, one right down the damn middle, where there is a balance maintained. Service to self and service to others. A healthy balance of ego is what keeps you alive. You must overcome that ego, but you don't kill that ego. A lot of people talk about the ego death. Well, it's what keeps you alive, so that would be problematic. Anyway, this is an apology to you for saying that you were screwed, because you aren't. But I did view some of your videos, and your birthday video in particular stood out to me. And significantly, you're a Taurus. My husband is a Taurus. Magnificent human being. Magnificent soul. So I know exactly. And in that video, you were talking about, what would you do if you had the kind of money Bill Gates has? And you said you'd want everybody to live equally. I say bravo on you. Your heart's in the right place. No doubt about it. Your heart is absolutely in the right place. The hearts of most of us are in the right place. We all just want to learn what we came here to learn, thrive, and survive, right? But knowing what we are dealing with is important before we jump into things. Something taking advantage of you during a weak moment of your life is not a good thing. You all should take heed in that. Anybody or anything, higher being, what have you, doesn't matter if it seeks you out when you're at your lowest. and basically makes a sort of bargain, that's not good. That's a soul contract. But there's a bright light. That soul contract can be revoked, especially if it's made under duress. hmm And unknowingly was something that you didn't realize you were contending with at the time. Anyway, I thought it was time for everybody to get a bit of a history lesson. And let me explain a few things. Based on my bloodlines, I am Anunnaki and I am Pleiadian. I'm both. My Anunnaki heritage comes from my Native American side, and my Pleiadian side comes from my European descent. That makes me rather qualified to speak on this. Now, the being that you're channeling currently is Pleiadian. Let me stop short right here and explain something. Not all Pleiadians are bad. The vast majority are quite much the same as the Anunnaki and want the same things. The problem is we have what's called, or what we're calling, the Orion group, and that is a specific branch of the Pleiadian group. They're currently ruling the planet. And if you like what you see, then definitely you're on their side. But if you don't like what you're seeing happening, then you're one of us, those walking into the age of Aquarius, a brave new world, one where we feel like nobody's above somebody else. Everybody's equally important because they are. The man collecting the trash and the doctor down the block, or the doctor he collects the trash for. Both those positions are equally important, yet they do not pay the same under this current age of Pisces establishment. So here's the thing, a history lesson for all of you. If you ever wanted to know the truth about what the hell's really going on down here, because that was part of my mission, was to ascertain what the hell is going on down here, quite literally. Anyway, we'll get into this. This material is not mine. It's from OOWK Media. Not everything is accurate, and I'll stop and explain why. But here's a history lesson for you guys. And it's backed up by not only the intense investigation of my own on what happened down here, the investigation of others and their great work. It's also backed up by remote viewers. And so there's been some confirmations happening about what really happened in the past. How did we get where we're at right now with this insanity going on? What I call the division. My team consists of Gabriel and Adonai and my husband. Gabriel has always called the other side the Great Pretenders. Now I know why. But he's always said that. I'm like, what do you mean the Great Pretenders? Now I know. And you guys should know this, because you need to know where you came from, the circumstances that led up to where we're at now. And, now it's time, once you guys learn this, to figure out, how do we change it? So, anyway, I'm going to play this video. I hope our dear friend, who has not produced a video on his channel in a while, whoever did OOWK Media, they were close, very close to the truth. But sometimes the truth gets squashed, and I hope they're still with us. But anyway, so I might do this video in 2 parts. So stick with me, Sam, and all our friends, whether you're Pleiadian or whether you're Anunnaki. Most of you are a combination of both. Most of you. And you'll see why that is, and why that happened, and why I separate a certain group, a certain sect, I'm calling the Orion group. So, here you go. Let's start.
"4,000 years ago, I would not have had to tell you this, since if you lived in those times you would have been taught this in school, but 4,000 years of a powerful directed misinformation campaign have taken their toll, and it'll take me some effort here to clarify some basics for you. The Sumerian civilization is the oldest known human civilization on Earth. Their gods were called the Anunnaki, which in Sumerian means those who from heaven to Earth came. It blossomed out almost overnight, around 3800 BC, in Mesopotamia, the land between the 2 rivers, Tigris and Euphrates, and came to a sudden end in 2024 BC, when it was laid waste by a deadly radioactive cloud, brought by easterly winds from the Sinai Peninsula, where according to some ancient records, a nuclear war took place. The huge black scar in the face of the Earth, in the southeastern part of the Sinai Peninsula, and the blackened stones that show signs of being instantly melted by extreme intense heat. There is more evidence. Higher than normal levels of radioactivity have been found in the Dead Sea. The site of Sodom and Gomorrah have been nuked at the same time, and in the land of Sumer itself, a recent study has found that around the time of the destruction of Sumer, there was a sudden climate change there, the nature of which is consistent with a nuclear fallout. The Sumerian civilization disappeared around 2000 BC, just as suddenly as it appeared. It is clear that its fall was very tragic, as many Sumerian lamentation texts have been found bewailing the destruction and desolation of various Sumerian cities. All these lamentation texts blame the destruction on the use of some weapons of terror and some great deadly cloud. The detailed descriptions of their effects leave no doubt that the weapons of terror were nuclear weapons. The intercontinental ballistic missiles that dropped nuclear warheads on Sodom and Gomorrah were launched from Africa and belonged to the Anunnaki. The Sumerian-era epic lists 5 cities, along with the spaceport in the Sinai, that were nuked, Sodom and Gomorrah being only 2 of them. The Bible goes into more detail as to what was actually going on. History had it that, Following the invasion of the Pleiadians, helped by Abram, the Anunnaki met in their assembly, and decided to nuke the spaceport, so that it did not fall into the hands of the Pleiadians. Armed with proper understanding of who the ancient gods really were, we can now properly address the question of why do we not see them and their advanced technologies among us, and why have we not seen them over the past few centuries? Where did they go? Zecharia Sitchin does not answer, or even address this question, and for the most part ends his Earth Chronicles in 2024 BC. In my research, I have found that all evidence points to the Anunnaki gods being overpowered and forced off the earth by Yahweh of Judeo-Christianity over the period from around 2000 BC to 1000 AD. The trouble started around 2000 BC, when just as the Anunnaki were fighting between themselves over whether Enki's son Magick would get his wish to take control over the human settlements from the other Anunnaki gods, something very strange was happening to a man of Sumerian descent named Abram. He received directions from some god. Logic suggests that this god was God Yahweh of Judaism, but there is no direct proof of this so far. The first appearance of Yahweh on earth is at the time of Exodus and the creation of the state of Israel in 1433 BC. But regarding the creation of humankind, Yahweh had his version of history that has been taught to people over the past 3,500 years. Enki was the devil. Enki appears in the Bible as Nahash, the serpent, who seduced Adam and Eve. So who was Yahweh? He was a god in the same sense in which the Anunnaki were gods. He was a ruler, a head of state, of the Pleiadians. He led the human slaves out of Egypt and into the Palestinian land he had picked for his state of Israel. Like the Anunnaki, he was also a real physical force, not a myth in people's minds. Some thinkers have been puzzled by how could the Jews so easily escape the Pharaoh's troops and defeat all the indigenous people of Canaan, who put up a defense against their invasion, even though the Jews were never particularly good warriors. Along the way to their promised land, they sacked the great city of Jericho. Jericho was the oldest city on earth, built around 8500 BC. Jericho was obviously built by the Anunnaki, not by humans. As the oldest city on earth and a major Anunnaki fortress, it was a repository of cultural valuables for thousands of years. The Jews laid it waste. But the question is, how did they manage to do it? Jericho was a major Anunnaki outpost and certainly very well fortified. How could a mob armed with weapons no more advanced than axes and spears and arrows overpower a fortified Anunnaki city, with guards armed with laser guns? The Jews themselves, of course, say that their god Yahweh helped them do it. And indeed he did. A close reading of the Bible reveals that as the Jews were marching from Egypt to their promised land, there was a UFO flying overhead. The accounts from the other side of the conflict confirm this. Yahweh was indeed responsible, and it was his ship that overpowered the defenses put up by the indigenous people of Canaan and their Anunnaki leaders. That is how the Judeo-Christian God forced the Anunnaki and their slave human followers out of Palestine. Yahweh wanted to take the control of the whole earth away from the Anunnaki. Over the millennium and a half before the birth of Christ, long and bitter wars were fought between Israel headed by Yahweh and the Anunnaki leaders. After centuries of bitter warfare, the Pleiadians were winning until a nuclear attack by the Anunnaki, mentioned before. The Middle East was lost to the Anunnaki. The Pleiadians had to evacuate to Western Europe. Where did the Anunnaki go? They settled in Eastern Europe. They became the gods of some ancient European people. Rome appears to be yet another culture under the aegis of the Anunnaki. The Roman.
That's where he had it wrong. He had it twisted. But you'll see what I'm talking about, based on remote viewing and other things.
And gods were copied from the Greek ones, and the Greeks were Anunnaki. The head of the Roman pantheon is generally thought of as Jupiter, a parallel of the Greek Zeus, whom I have determined to be the same person as the Hittite Baal and the Semitic Shamash, the commander of space operations of the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki were forced out of the Middle East first, then out of Europe. Their last home on Earth was ancient Russia, and when it was Christianized, the Anunnaki gods had to take off in their rockets and leave the Earth. Many of them probably went back to their home planet, but others may be closer, no farther than the moon. Muslims recognize Allah as the moon god. And there is plenty of moon symbolism in Islam. The Anunnaki controlled the Middle East through Islam. After the Anunnaki left the Middle East, the people living there continued to worship them. Chief among them in certain lands was Allah. The timing only confirms this hypothesis. All this was happening at exactly the same time with Europe and Russia became Christian. Besides the general evidence for an active non-human base on the moon, it is widely rumored in certain circles that the US astronauts received very little welcome from the operators of this base. Simply put, the Yankees were told that they are not welcome on the moon and should go back to where they came from. The moon program was hastily abandoned as a result. I also suspect that the Soviets never went there not because they couldn't, but because they already knew. If the moon base is under Anunnaki command as I suspect, their lack of hospitality to Uncle Sam's ambassadors is quite understandable. The present-day American imperialism hated by the rest of the world, is almost certainly of Anunnaki origin. When the European thinkers of the Renaissance rediscovered the ancient Egyptian teachings, they associated themselves first and foremost with the Egyptian goddess Isis. Sitchin has shown that Isis was the great-great-granddaughter of Anunnaki leader Enki. Enki led a separate faction of the Anunnaki that I believe was partially Syrian, as Enki's mother was apparently from Sirius, the brightest star as seen from Earth. It seems like several attempts were made at recovering the Earth long after it was taken over by the Pleiadians and all other Anunnaki fled in their spaceships. As it turns out, there is a very well-known city on Earth that still bears her name. That city is Paris. Paris was founded around 300-200 BCE and its original Latin name is Par Isis, the city of Isis. In light of this knowledge and of the fact that France was a major center of the Enlightenment, coupled with some other curious facts, for example that Josephine, Napoleon's wife, considered herself almost a reincarnation of Isis, or that the French have copied many Egyptian elements and seriously contemplated building their own stone pyramids, a case can be made for the hypothesis that the Renaissance which significantly weakened the Catholic Church was none other than another attempt by the Anunnaki to take this planet back from the Pleiadians. It looks like that attempt was a partial success and partial failure. It wasn't entirely successful as the French Revolution was not carried all the way to a permanent regime change to bring back ancient Egypt under the Anunnaki. But it was a partial success in that feudalism gave way to capitalism. The internal contradictions of wild capitalism led to revolutionary situations forming in Russia and Germany, but the two countries took drastically different paths. As the hidden war between the Anunnaki and the Pleiadians took a new turn.
This is specifically for Sir Sam. Take a look at India, where you reside. Your bloodline. You speak against the Anunnaki, yet you are an Anunnaki. You get where the problem might lie? With who you're channeling. When you're channeling a Pleiadian. Let's continue.
I believe that the Cold War was actually that very same cosmic war, with the Soviets being on the side of the Anunnaki and the US being on the side of Pleiadians. Stalin's father was a Nyaz. Nyazi were the olden Russian nobility stemming from pre-Tsarist ancient Russia. They probably allied with the Anunnaki to take Russia back. Pleiadian humans came here as warrior colonists about 3,500 years ago. There were 50,000, and they were from 7 different human planets. They landed in the region we call Europe and we think of them as European whites. They evolved as different people with different European languages on 7 different worlds, none of them from Earth. This is where the German, French, Italian, Spanish, Polish, Hungarian and Slav languages came from. All other European languages, including English, have evolved here. They came here to Earth because they and their planets were at war with an invading race called the Reptilians. The Reptilians had invaded 2 human worlds and exterminated the humans there. This was a war of no quarter. The warrior colonists, Pleiadian space forces had thoroughly destroyed 4 large reptilian hives and numerous sub-hives here on Earth. Their warrior colonists were landed to complete any additional destruction of reptilian forces here, and to hold the planet if the reptilians re-invaded. Unbeknownst to the Pleiadian space forces, the reptilians had a 5th major hive under the ice in Antarctica which was not detected and
This is incorrect. Well, partially incorrect. It's a Pleiadian reptilian base in Antarctica. Remote viewers, they're quite handy in assessing what's what. Anyway, let's continue.
not destroyed. The reptilians sent diplomatic signals and a truce was established for planet Earth only. You ask why a truce would apply. Most of the population of humans on Earth were slave races created by the reptilian allies who called themselves the Anunnaki. The Pleiadian space forces did not know that a reptilian hive still survived and agreed to a truce for Earth only. The warrior colonists were landed and appeared to thriving. The slave races created by the Anunnaki were a mix of Anunnaki reptilian DNA genetically engineered into various indigenous primate from all over planet Earth. The Anunnaki came to Earth originally to mine gold and diamonds, but only came with about 400 males. They needed slave labor to perform the mining and desired to have women as sexual companions. Many of the primates used to create Homo sapiens did not survive the process and became extinct. This is what happened to the Neanderthals from what we call Europe. It also explains why there was no indigenous population to contest the landings of the Pleiadian warrior colonists.
I want to get something straight so that you all have this straight in your heads. Pleiadians are one race, Anunnakis are another race, and reptilians are another race. There's actually 3. Actually, there's far more than that, but those are the main 3.
Unfortunately for the Earth, the conditions of the truce were to sever all communications between the Pleiadian space forces and the warrior colonists. They were left to fend for themselves and soon turned to fighting amongst themselves and, eventually, conquering the known world. We call that.
Notice, this is where the overlay happens, and why Gabriel keeps calling them the great pretenders. Notice the swastikas. Commonly, most people jump to the Nazis, and they think that the Anunnaki are the same as the Nazis. They actually refer to that in this video. That's where they were wrong. The Nazis are the Orion group. But here's the kicker. Let's go down here. The swastika was not originally a Nazi symbol. That's the overlay. They stole. All you have to do is look at remote viewing sessions that were done specifically by Farsight Institute. There's others that did them as well. They're not the only ones. There's been an overlay. The Bhagavad Gita. Sir Sam and everyone else is the oldest text. And the remote viewer saw where that came from. And it came from a group they're calling the domain, the realm. That's where I feel like I came from. I've already said long ago, I did not come from this. You know, people ask me, what planet do you think you're from? I'm not from here. Sir Sam, you need to look at your own backyard if you want some truth. Bhagavad Gita. Check it out. The remote viewers said it came from someone from a group called the Domain, the Realm, the Anunnaki. All you have to do is look at Stitchin's work. The Anunnaki made the Igigi, who occupied Mars. That was their home planet. They are the Pleiadian group. There was a war out there. It actually destroyed one planet completely, and it stripped the atmosphere from Mars. So the Pleiadians, the Orion group, was allowed, basically, this is my understanding, to come here as AKA watchers, babysitters for the planet. They weren't supposed to rule over the planet. They were just supposed to take care of the planet and babysit, basically, the humans, the hybrids. The thing is, when the cat's away, the mice will play, right? I've had experiences with many ET races myself personally. And when they remote viewed the domain, one of the remote viewers picked up on a very small ET race that's blue. Those are my little blue guys. They're highly advanced. You want to know real history, you're getting some of it here. So that's why I was like, well, anyway, you must know what you are channeling. You don't blindly go into something like that and make slow contracts unless you know what you're doing. Many, you're not the only one that's made that mistake. Like I said, it's just a mistake. It happens. We all make mistakes. I've had to go back and correct myself because one thing about this channel is everything is about the truth. 100% that sword of destiny, that ace of swords. Truth and clarity. I think I've pretty much gotten to the bottom of what's going on down here. That's been my mission. And now my mission has changed. And the mission is now healing the division, the divide that's been created by the certain group of Orions that we're supposed to be babysitting, not ruling and lording. Sir Sam and most of you listening, you want one thing: to live while we're here incarnate, to live peacefully, equally. That's exactly what I want. Anyway, I'm going to stop here and continue with a part 2 right behind this. I don't want the thing to be overly lengthy. I want people to digest what they're hearing. Because it took a, a great deal to undo and untangle the very tampered with text down here and come to a final realization of what's happened. And you guys are benefiting from many hours of Gabriel working with me and Adonai working with me to sort it all out. But I've got a pretty firm grasp of it now. And the fact that my husband is French and German descent, and I'm Native American and European descent, makes us both extremely qualified and very not unlike the Romeo and Juliet story that you all hear about. The twins. Anyway, more to come right behind this video. I do hope you're listening. It's important. You have a responsibility. You have gained the ears of many followers, and I commend you for that. But here's the thing. With that comes great responsibility, and you have a road to pick. We all have a road to pick. Service to self, service to others, or, dare I say, let's trudge and forge a new road right down the damn middle and close with the divide that's happening on the planet. Anyway, so more to come. I do hope you guys are listening.